Interruptions. Yeah, today I want to talk about interruptions. Interruptions.
Steve.
Yeah?
Excuse me.
What?
Just have to tell you something.
Can you wait till a little later?
That's interruption.
So what's an interruption? Well, an interruption is kind of when your life is going one way and you're living towards your plan, and right in the middle of it, someone steps in, someone intervenes, someone says time out, and you're interrupted. Kind of like what Martha just did. And check this out. There's probably no better time to talk about interruptions than the Christmas season, because Christmas season is crazy. We run around 1,000,000 miles an hour from one thing to the next. How many of us have tons of things still we have to get done before Christmas? Raise your hand. Got it. Guys, did you get your special lady something for Christmas? Do you even have a plan? Or maybe you go Christmas shopping on December 24th. Remember, that is actually executing to a plan. Short-term plan, but it's a plan. End of year deadlines, holiday traffic, kids programs at school. Hey, COVID kind of gave us a break from the kids programs at school this year. Kind of gave us a break from some of the sports and the Pee-wee programs too. All of us have agendas. All of us are busy. So here's the question. What if the God of the universe wanted to interrupt our lives today? Are you interruptible? Because God can be a pretty good interrupter. Aren't you glad that he stepped into your life? Aren't you glad that he stepped in when maybe things weren't going so well and turned your life around? Interrupted the way it was going, and our God is a God of interruption. In fact, our Bibles are full of stories of interruption. The Red Sea, the plagues, entire people groups were interrupted. Armies were interrupted. The giant got interrupted by a couple stones. And God steps in and he hits the brakes. And if you look at Jesus' life, good luck at telling the story of Jesus without talking about interruptions. Look at what happens when you take out the interruptions. There would be no Bartimaeus. Water wouldn't get turned to wine. No Zacchaeus. Anybody who was sick, they were all interruptions. None of that. No dead people coming back to life. The bleeding woman, nope. The woman washing Jesus' feet, nope. The adulteress, and Jesus drawing in the dirt. How about when the children came to him? If you look at Jesus' life and you take out the interruptions, you get a pretty short story. So here's the reality. Our God is a God of interruption. And we need to be interruptible. I'm not sure if that's a word, but spell check didn't correct it. Here's the problem, though. Most of us hate to be interrupted. Anybody willing to go on record? Anybody hate to be interrupted? Yeah, a couple of us. The ones that didn't raise your hand, do you have kids? The gospel is all about interruptions. And life is about how we respond to those interruptions. So how do you do with interruptions? Today, let's look at an interruption where God steps in. And he stirs up a life And he leaves it completely transformed, tremendously different. And this interruption, this transforms life as we know it today. Let me tell you about a teenage girl named Mary. I'm sure you heard that story in Luke, right? Let me share with you Luke chapter 1 and verses 26 to 29. I think you know this story, but let's listen again. Luke 1, 26 to 29. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, remember Elizabeth is going to be the mother of John the Baptist. She's Mary's cousin. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. The angel went to her and said, "Greetings." I like that. At least he said hi first. "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. Mary was greatly troubled at his words. I guess. I think I'd be greatly troubled too if one minute I'm sitting there and the next minute the angel Gabriel is there talking to me. But it says that she wasn't troubled by his appearance. She was greatly troubled by his words, and she wondered what kind of greeting this might be. Now, if I'm Mary, I may have thought, talking to me? Did you get the right girl? Anybody ever been out in public when you see someone just smiling and waving at you? "Hey, how are you?" they holler. And you know them, but you can't place where you know them from. But they keep waving, and so you wave back, "Hi, how you doing?" And then you realize that they're waving to the person behind you. And doesn't that make you just feel completely like an idiot? Because you're like, "Ah!" No, that wasn't me waving. Mary says, "God, I'm not sure what you have to say. Are you sure you got the right girl? Do you want me to go get my mom?" Maybe Mary was troubled because of the unknown and what God was going to ask her to do. Think about it. Mary had just gotten engaged. Have you ever been around a young girl who had just gotten engaged and all they can do is think about planning for a wedding? Engagements were a bit more involved back then. You didn't just find somebody to which you had a connection. No, back then the two families would get together and they'd decide what was best for the boy and the girl. And the families planned the engagement. And the girl's thinking, "I hope they pick somebody good for me." And at the start of the engagement, the two families trade property, they trade money. In essence, they make a contract. Engagements was where the whole family was in. They're making a commitment, the whole family. Engagements back then were really more like a marriage is today than an engagement. In an engagement, somewhere after you had traded property, if one of the parties wanted out of the engagement, it took a legal divorce to break the engagement. In engagement, you made a commitment, but you weren't going to consummate the marriage. And you weren't going to consummate the marriage for about a year. So for a year, here's what would happen. He stays where he is, she stays where she is. And they're going their own way. The man goes to build a place for them. She goes to prepare. And after he's done, a year later, he comes back and he grabs the engaged girl, and then they have this celebration. And after that, that's when they get to be together and to consummate their marriage. Folks, Mary is right in the middle of this process. Maybe that's why she was troubled. She's sitting there saying, God, I love that you're here. I love that your angel's here, but what's he going to ask me to do? Because I don't know if you know that I'm engaged right now. I'm in this process. Our families like each other, and we've already exchanged the stuff. And we already have plans. Sometimes we're surprised by God's presence, and we get kind of paralyzed by what we wonder he's going to ask us to do. Luke 1, 30-33. But the angel said to her, "Oh, sweet, sweet girl." That's the Steve LaCavage translation part that I just put in there. But the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end." Mary, this is not your everyday interruption. This is a divine interruption. And when it's a divine interruption, it is a holy invitation. Yeah, when it's a divine interruption, it's a holy invitation. Come on, Mary, do you really think I got the wrong person here? By the way I run the universe and how everything is ordered, do you think I showed up at the wrong house? No, you know I know who you are. And I know the plans that you have for you. And I know the grind that you're going through to get your plans for your world. I know your plans. Today it would be a house on a hill, school, kids, and you don't want any interruptions. Mary, what you don't know is the plans that I have for you. Where I want to take you. You see, divine interruption is better than your plan. It's a better plan than your plan. Mary, I'm inviting you into the whole realm of history. What does Scripture say later? All generations will call you blessed. Your son is going to change everything. Folks, please don't miss that this divine interruption is a holy invitation, and so are ours. It's not a bother. It is a holy invitation. Luke 1:34. "How will this be," Mary asked the angel, "since I am a virgin?" How are we going to pull this off? See, last time I checked, virgins don't have babies. God, is that the plan? Because if that's the plan, it's going to happen a lot differently than it ever has happened before. Ever had God interrupt your plans with something that you think is way too big, way too different, way too crazy? Some of us get interrupted by God and we welcome the interruption, but we question how God is going to make it happen. God, I know you're interrupting me to pray, but God's people pray all the time and stuff doesn't happen. Why are you interrupting me today for my prayer? How is my prayer better? God, right now I feel the invitation to talk to my neighbor about you, but he's a pretty arrogant sort of fellow, God. People like him are really hard to change. Can you give me somebody nicer? Who's a little bit easier to clean up? Someone who just needs a little Jesus, not the whole show. Because I'm into that. But the neighbor, that's asking a lot. It's pretty big. God, I know you're calling me to financially help some individual, but really, God, how do I know what they're going to do with the money? Do you think it could be a scam? And God, sometimes your interruptions bother me because I'm just flat out pretty insecure. God, I know what you're asking me to do, but you know that I have a past. God, you know I'm barely getting by on my own right now. God, I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm too busy. I'm not ready for this. I'm not smart enough for this. I don't have the right personality. Someone actually said this week. They told me they were too white to relate to the problems of a black family. Can't help you, God, today. I'm a little too white. And it kind of becomes infectious. Telling God all the reasons we can't do what he's interrupted us to do. Do we think he came to the wrong spot? The wrong girl? The wrong guy? Let me tell you this. This is something I'm going to tell you that's going to be hard for me to say because I am so embarrassed by it. Some students I work with from the junior college up in Jamestown, New York, I was doing a Bible study off campus with a bunch of the kids there. And they had an idea to reach out to some of the homeless in the city of Jamestown. And they were excited and they prayed about it. And guess what Steve started saying? Are you sure that's what you really want to do? You know, where the homeless are, that's a really bad area of Jamestown. And you know there's drugs, and you know there's addiction, and you know there's alcohol, and you know there's violence. And are you kidding me, Steve? Shut your mouth. God interrupts these kids with this plan, and Wet Blanket Steve steps up and he puts out the fire. Steve robbed a holy invitation from some kids that God called to help. And I got to tell you, I've done some dumb stuff, but this is way up on the top of the list. They went anyway. Mary says, I'm a virgin. And the angel doesn't even flinch at her comment. Verses 35 to 37. The angel answered, the Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age. And she who is said to be unable to conceive is in her 6th month. For no word from God will ever fail. For no word from God will ever fail. Maybe another way we put that is to say this, that nothing is impossible with God. With divine interruption, nothing is impossible. And just because you've never seen it doesn't mean God isn't going to do it. And maybe some of us need to hear that today. It's impossible for God to speak it and not have it happen. A virgin is going to give birth. Elizabeth, who is way, way too old to have a child, is going to have a child. If you follow Jesus long enough, you're going to see a lot of stuff that isn't supposed to happen that happens. Because nothing is impossible for God. Here's Mary's response. Oh, that it would be mine. Oh, that it would be yours. I am the Lord's servant, Mary answered. May your word to me be fulfilled. Then the angel left her. I'm in. Let's roll. It's going to be a challenge. It will affect every area of Mary's life. She's going to go home to a family after spending 3 months with her cousin. 3 months pregnant, not from her husband. And how is her family going to react to that? Everyone in her life, everyone is going to tell her she's been unfaithful. How is her community going to respond? A teenage pregnant girl needs support from her community. Remember, they're not living together. Are they going to label her? You know what that word is they use? Remember the Bible story where the woman got caught in adultery? Remember what they were going to do to her? They were going to stone her to death. I don't know if you know back then, but the man caught in adultery, he got a fine. Woman, she got stoned to death. And Joseph, she's going to have to look him in the eyes, and she doesn't know that he's already had an angelic vision as well. She's going to have to say something like, honey, I know this sounds crazy, but one thing's for certain, the old playbook won't work anymore. The old plans won't work. The old provisions for her won't work. The old community of care won't work. She's going to have to trust, and trust God in a tremendous way. And she says, yes. Let's do it. Folks, I want to say yes to God's interruptions. I want you to say yes to them too. And there'll be a cost. In order for us to find life, we must lose it. Sometimes in American churches, we kind of run the numbers. How much are you asking for, God? 10%? Can I give you 9? I'm really busy, but God, I can give you every other Tuesday night. I got work and I got these other things, but I will absolutely fit in every other Tuesday night. Kingdom principle. When you surrender it all, you get Jesus. And when you get Jesus, you have it all. You have everything. Guess what Mary was getting? My friends, when it's a divine interruption, the answer needs to be yes. Can we practice that? Can we just say yes? I want to be interruptible. No matter what the interruption is, I want to say yes. Can I tell you Jason's story? Jason was reading one day in God's Word, and he was struck by Matthew chapter 25 and verses 34 to 36. This is where God is talking about separating the sheep and the goats, on the left and the right. Remember the story? And right there, God steps in and interrupts his life. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world." And he smiles. "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me." Bang! Interruption. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. What? Why does that burn so? Why is that so sticky? Why can't I get that word prison out of my mind? I don't know any felons. I've never even been to a prison, even to visit. God, what are you asking me to do? And I think God says, you know what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to get engaged in the prison system. I think here's where Jason calls the timeout. God, can I tell you why that's a bad idea? Because I'm an introvert. And I don't know anyone in the system. And I certainly don't know anything about the prison system. And I think God says, listen, Jason, Google it. Are you telling me you're not smart enough to Google it and learn about this stuff? To find a prison ministry who's all wrapped around Jesus and join it. Through a local prison ministry, he met up with a mother who has a son who was in the local federal prison. Her son was incarcerated for manslaughter and will be incarcerated for the next 15 years. And through this prison ministry, he visits this man and has taught him about Jesus. And now about a year later, this man has his own ministry where he's rocking the other prisoners for Jesus. He also visits the prisoner's mother, who's on the outside, but started a Bible study in her home for other people, with people incarcerated. It was 2, it's now 10. And he does all this and he still maintains a full-time job. Right in the middle of a daily Bible reading, God interrupted Jason. And he said yes. His church calls him a prison warrior. Kind of like that. Mary was interrupted by God and she said yes. And in Mary's yes, we got Jesus. Whose life would change if we said yes to our godly interruptions. We know from this book what Mary said. She said yes. We will be interrupted by the God of the universe. Question is what will we say? Because many say no. Many say not yet.